everybody, this is Daryl, and this is the commentary to the game show skit. Game show was a skit that involved mostly physical comedy, and a lot of it was improvised by the performers on the stage, and it would include going out into the crowd. I would be reading the words in red. I was acting as the game show host for a really just terrible game show. Dirt cheap, obviously had no chance in staying on the air, and there were 3 contestants, one in blue, one in yellow, and one will be in green for these words. Like I said, it involves mostly physical comedy. The words itself aren't all that great. Here it starts off with my little speech introducing, well, who wants to survive a bachelor's eliminate while trading spaces with an American Idol? MeetYourNewMommy.com. Tonight's episode, contestants will overcome their greatest fears and vote someone off the island. This is all just back in the early to mid 2000s. There were a lot of reality shows, especially a lot of reality game shows, trading your house in, trading your wife in, blah blah blah. I made the skit largely to make fun of the reality television. And here I introduce the 2 contestants, but there's actually 3 of them up on the stage. And here the first guy gets to say his name, the second guy gets to say his name, here's the second guy saying his name. And then here's where I notice that there's a third person up there. He tries to give his name, but he doesn't actually get it out. And here I complain that there's only supposed to be 2 of them. And here in a monotone voice, he's like, surprise. Okay, and here I start asking questions. I say whoever buzzes in first wins. The first guy asks, what if we get the question wrong? Second guy gets upset at him, like, shh, shut up, he just said whoever buzzes in first wins. He wants to cheat to win the game. Third guy asks when he can say what his name is. Okay, my first question is, what's 2 plus 2? Okay, what happens here is, since this skit involved mostly physical comedy, is contestant number 1 tries to buzz in, but nobody acknowledges it, and you discover through the physical actions that the buzzers don't work up on the stage. This show is too cheap to actually have real buzzers. So finally contestant number 2 just shrugs and yells out bzzz, and then I acknowledge that he buzzed in, like contestant number 2, and the guy answers, he's like 4, and of course 2 plus 2 equals 4. And then contestant number 1, who was buzzing in first with the fake buzzer, he starts complaining because he buzzed in first and I didn't acknowledge it. I tell him, sorry, we couldn't hear you, your buzzer must be broke. And contestant number 1 complains, that's not fair. Number 2 points out that the show is so cheap that it probably can't afford real buzzers, which is true. And then I read question number 2, what day is it? So contestant number 1 yells out buzz, 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 buzz. So then I ask him, like, contestant number 2, and he's kind of caught off guard, like, me? And contestant number 1's like, what? And then contestant number 2 answers with the correct name of the day, and I tell number 2 that he is correct. Blue complains that he buzzed in first. I say, sorry, it sounded like number 2's buzzer. Perhaps you should try a different noise. At this point, a lot of the physical comedy happens. What we would do is give the guys the actual scripts up on the stage. And when it came time to turn pages to the script, I would clear my throat, and we would go through some shenanigans, people trading scripts back and forth, dropping them on the floor, running out in the crowd, tearing up papers, you name it. It was improvised, just whatever the people wanted to do with their skits and their papers, just make a big show of turning the page. And then we would turn the page, and go back to the normal skit with contestant number 1 saying, I don't believe this. And then I read question number 3, how much does free cost? So number 1 finally gets that he can't buzz, so he starts beeping. He's like, beep, beep, beep. And I acknowledge him. I'm like, number 1, what is your answer? And number 1 answers, nothing. So then I tell him, well, if you didn't want to answer, why did you buzz in? And he tries to object. No, my answer is nothing. Free costs nothing. So then I go, judges, which would be the crowd, see if they say yes or no. Then after they give their verdict, if his answer was correct, I'd go on to question number 4. What weighs more, a ton of bricks or a ton of feathers? This is when contestant number 3 jumps up out of the chair and yells out, cock-a-doodle-doo, which, of course, catches me off guard. And here he tries to finally get to say his name, but of course I cut him off and tell him it's a wrong answer. They both weigh a ton. Just try to get him shut up. And he's like, but I didn't even answer yet. And then I ignore him, or ignore his pleas, and say it's time to vote somebody off the island, and have each of them write down the name of the person they want to vote off the island. One by one, they reveal their answers, and all 3 of them have the same answer. Daryl, Daryl, and Daryl, which is me, and I'm the host. I object. I'm like, you can't vote off the host. Who's going to read the questions? And then I say, fine, I'll just have to become a contestant 2, and I have the answers already. And at this time, I go to join the contestants, so now there's 4 of us as contestants and nobody to host the show. And then what happens is, I had set it up previously before the show that I told an audience member as they were coming into the crowd that if at any point in time during the whole show, not the skit or anything, just the whole show, if I ended up getting kicked off the show or whatever, that they should just jump up and yell out, I'll do it, I'll do it, I'll do it. So somebody would jump out of the crowd and volunteer to read the questions. And here, getting back to contestant number 2, since I've become a contestant now, he asks if he can copy off me. I tell him no. Contestant number 3 says he's not even supposed to be here today. And I snap at him, well, duh, there's only supposed to be room for 2 contestants. But there's 4 of us up there, so all 4 of us take turns counting each other, over-exaggerated, counting 4 fingers, asking about 2 contestants. So I shrug and say, well, then I'm going to go back to asking questions. Then we go through the shenanigans once again of tossing scripts on the floor, tearing them up, people falling out of their chairs, people stealing chairs from each other, shuffling around, going out and messing with the audience. And then I resume the show again. I'm like, okay, now it's time for the daily double. What is the meaning of life? Contestant number 1 asks if he can use a lifeline. I tell him no. Contestant number 3 asks if he can say his name, which I still deny him. And contestant number 1 asks me if that's my final answer after I tell him no. I roll my eyes at him, and then I end the show. I'm sorry, folks, but we're all out of time. Tune in next week when our contestants eat bugs to find out who their real father is after racing across the world searching for clues on how to swap their lives for an extreme makeover. You're fired. Good night. Which is the end of the script.